Hello, everyone. My name is Carolina Mattsson. I'm a recent PhD in network science from Northeastern University and currently a postdoc at the Leiden Institute for Advanced Computer Science. The work that I am sharing with you today is a mixed survey and digital trace approach that my co-authors and I developed to study social ties in action during and after the Boston Marathon bombings. My next slide is on that, just a heads up for a disturbing image. So the Boston Marathon bombings is the kind of event that I'm sure you will remember hearing about. Two improvised bombs exploded at the finish of the marathon a few seconds apart on April 15th, 2013 at 2:50 p.m. 3 people lost their lives, and it is a testament to the effectiveness of the official emergency response that this number wasn't higher. But it was a salient social situation for many more thousands of people. You can put yourself into the shoes of someone who is nearby when it happened and ask yourself, what would you do? Very likely, if you could, you would call someone. Communication volumes reliably spike following sudden emergencies. People feel an urgent need to get in touch with others, especially those they are close with or concerned about. You might also seek help if you needed it, or try to help if you didn't. The subfield within sociology that studies disaster response has long argued that this pro-social citizen response is as much or more important than the official response in the immediate aftermath of sudden emergencies. You might also look to make sense of the situation that you find yourself in by discussing it with others. You might inadvertently spread rumors about it. So this is a lot. It is a complicated topic, and there are many different methodological approaches that we can take to studying the citizen response to emergencies. This session is called Embrace the Trace. So I'll start with the digital trace approach. One of the most consequential aspects of digital trace data from call records, wearable sensors, Facebook, Twitter, etc., is its specificity in time and place. We know that cellular records in particular give us a window into collective responses to emergencies, including bombings. The difficulty lies, of course, in interpretation. We will always need to rely on domain-specific knowledge, and the field of disasters is predominantly survey-based. Now, while digital trace methods have not made a lot of headway, there is a lot of, there's a thriving overlap with classic survey-based social network analysis, and that's kind of, with social network analysis, and that's kind of fun because integrating social network analysis surveys with digital trace data is a mainstay of computational social science. The focus of these efforts have tended to be on structural network analysis, but that doesn't have to be the case. What we really would like to be studying social ties in action. And so by studying social ties in action, I mean digital trace data plus social network surveys in specific important context. And I think it would be great if we could kind of start right here in the middle and not have to go through all of that other stuff, develop methodologies specifically for this. So that's what we look to do. We develop an approach for studying social ties in action. There are 3 key pieces to our approach. The first is to hone in on a context-specific research setting. Ours is the Boston Marathon bombings, so we are studying the citizen response to a sudden emergency, and that means that we need to pick outcome variables that are relevant in the context of this particular social process. Then we are measuring the relevant social ties using hybrid data collection. We want both behavioral traces and survey solicited information about the same ties. In our project, we use a custom Android mobile app for this, but that's not the only way to do it. And finally, to analyze this data, we are pulling from modern techniques in statistical learning, so AI, machine learning, statistics, data science, whatever you want to call it. And that is because we want basic predictive models of the measurable contextual actions that we care about. And we absolutely have to prioritize variable selection over pinpointing effect sizes. That is because ties are multifaceted, and there are 80 million different things that we could be measuring about the same ties that are absolutely, definitely going to be hopelessly multicollinear. Thankfully, modern statistics is made for this. We use lasso regression and cross-validation to get groups of variables that together tell us something about our contextually relevant outcome variables. So this is our demonstration study. Let me move into talking about what we've done. Again, the Boston Marathon bombings provides an unwelcome but profound source of context, and it can help us study the citizen response to a sudden emergency. 3 aspects of our study design deliberately incorporated this context-specific research setting. First, we encouraged participation by those directly affected with timely deployment and targeted remuneration. This got us some positive press and a focused data set. Second, we sampled ties and collected behavioral data in relation to the day of the bombings. Third, we adapted the survey questions to incorporate salient aspects of the citizen response to a sudden emergency. These are our outcome variables: whether someone was contacted in the first 30 minutes, phone conversations later in the day, helping behavior, and information sharing. The hybrid data collection, we used a custom Android app that both collected behavioral data and ran a survey. So when you first loaded it onto your phone, it first asked for informed consent and then ran a respondent-centric survey about you and what you were doing during the bombings. While it was running that survey, it accessed communication records from April 15th, 2013 to sample top contacts, the people you talked with on that day after the bombing. And then it ran a short survey about each of these top contacts, and that it also collected and standardized metadata about these top contacts, things like how often you had communicated with them in the week or month prior. Just under half of the ties in this data set were given the label friend. Our sample skews young, so we see more ties to parents than to children. On the right, you'll see that there is a lot of variation in log number of calls in the past 30 days within our survey solicited role relations. This is telling you that our social network and digital trace data are capturing kind of different things that are obviously related, but not at all one-to-one. So here I'm showing you what the variable selection process called lasso regularization looks like under the hood. This is a variable trace plot. Lambda is a penalty that gets smaller as you go from left to right. The first variable that breaks through this penalty to be predictive on its own is the log number of calls this dyad shared over the previous 30 days. Then comes role relations, your spouse or partner and or a parent. Note that when these get added in, the call variable becomes less predictive. That's kind of what we'd expect. They are collinear. So yeah, we have to work with that. They're collinear. The vertical lines are when cross-validation shows that adding more variables doesn't help you anymore. And we show kind of the median and a more conservative breaking point. So here we're looking at call duration, who was having longer conversations later in the day. Again, from left to right, you see that person that you call a lot, a person you talk with on the phone a lot beforehand. So maybe someone that you kind of already are in the habit of calling or sharing emotional conversations with, having long conversations with, and then also parents and not a coworker for talking later in the day. It can get even more interesting if you ask survey questions about key outcome variables, like whether this tie helped you or vice versa after the bombings. From left to right, again, we have that person that you call a lot, but just barely before the context itself takes over. Helpful dyads were often those where both people were close enough to help each other. Of course, lots of other features correlate with this, like who you went to the marathon with, who you live close to. Perhaps interesting is also that gender suddenly matters here in this context. Women helped each other more so than mixed or all male dyads. Finally, our survey solicited outcome variable of whether this tie shared information with you or whether you shared information with them. Lasso comes out and tells us that nothing we're throwing at it is convincing. Everything was sharing information with everyone they came into contact with. Didn't matter so much who they were. Of course, this is a non-result, but it's actually really, really nice that this analysis approach can give you non-results when what you're working with is not predictive and you're probably on the wrong track. So it's actually a huge benefit to theorizing and analyzing social processes directly. So it's much easier to tell if you are off base, and that is one of the major benefits of our methodology. So let me step back for a second and kind of tell you about where this fits in with social theory, because I think this method that I'm showing you, this mix of survey solicited digital trace data in context, can help us rethink how we understand and study social networks. Thankfully, some of the most recent theoretical developments in social networks are moving us in this direction. So our work kind of fits in as a methodological piece to this theory. Mario Small has advanced a highly contextual view of social networks where these networks are anything but fixed. Context itself can be highly influential as to how we conceptualize and how we make use of our social networks. Meanwhile, Kitts and Cotain point out that there are various ways of conceptualizing social ties, whether that is as role relations, mother-friend, sentiment, liking, disliking, interactions as getting toward the behavioral side, and access as in social capital theory. These are all related, clearly. They describe different aspects of the same social tie, but they're not interchangeable when it comes to empirical analysis. In our paper, I've been calling this conceptualization of social ties as multifaceted. This is with an eye towards the intuition that actions in a particular context might reflect more strongly some specific facets of a single tie, and this can help move us towards what both of these authors advocate for, which is to more directly theorize and look at these social processes themselves. Here, I'm gonna show, this is now a way to kind of put the results in Lasso and stuff more into the context of social networks again. Here I'm taking this predictive group of variables that Lasso and cross-validation selected for us, plugging that into a multi-level regression that takes into account grouping by the 48 respondents. So this is now a more formal result that directly supports this notion that there are several related but not interchangeable facets to social ties. Using ANOVA, we can actually show that ignoring any of these facets would give an incomplete idea of social tie activation processes during sudden emergencies. So, in conclusion, we can study social ties in action. A pilot study like this isn't going to be able to tell us everything about how people act in emergencies, but we now have a combined survey and digital trace methodology that lets us study the social process directly. We can pick context-specific research settings, we can collect hybrid data about relevant social ties, and we can look to predict what facets of our social networks affect our actions in key contextual situations. So thank you, that is it for me. And I hope you all will stick around to ask me questions about this later.